Good afternoon, everybody. My presentation is vastly different from the previous one, so I'll get into a different state of mind. It's very much management focused because I'm the manager of subsistence and artisanal fisheries in the province. So, yeah, I'll just have to work out how this thing works. Okay, thank you. So it's a snapshot of contemporary management of subsistence and artisanal fisheries in KwaZulu-Natal. So it's really an overview of how we're managing subsistence and artisanal fisheries in the province and looking at the management challenges that we're experiencing in the present day. So just a little bit about history of fisheries. I think it's important to sort of set the scene because obviously the history of the fisheries has led to the management challenges that we're experiencing today. So just a little quick thing on definitions, which are obviously quite controversial, but I'll go through those. Subsistence fishers are sort of defined as mainly poor people from rural communities who personally harvest marine resources, mainly in close proximity to where they live and generally for food. And when we say food, it's not that communities are solely dependent on resources. Food it's more of a protein supplement that we refer to when we talk about the dependence on resources for food. Artisanal fishers, sometimes, or the term that is more widely used these days is small-scale fishers. They are people that harvest they have a tradition of fishing, and they use low-technology gear, which is normally handmade. And those fisheries, in contrast to subsistence fisheries, are commercially driven. So they actually fish for profit. KZN has relatively small subsistence and artisanal fisheries, and that is in comparison to other African coastal areas and also to other areas in South Africa, like the Western Cape. And there's two important reasons for that. And the first one is environmental factors, and that is our high energy coastline and our lack of sheltered bays and inlets, and then also the low productivity system. So we don't have the upwelling that the Western Cape does have. So our system is nutrient poor, and that just means that we just don't have the resources that they do in other areas to support those kind of artisanal small-scale fisheries. Cultural factors. There is an absence of traditional uses of fish and invertebrate resources by most groups of the isiZulu that migrated from the north to southern Africa. So fish was regarded as an inferior food source. That has also just led to, one of the factors that has led to the lack of development of artisanal fisheries in KwaZulu-Natal compared to other regions. But, however, saying that, there are two groups in KwaZulu-Natal, indigenous groups of people, the Khoisan, referred to as the Strandlopers, and then the Amatonga people, or the Tembi Tonga people from northern Zululand, who obviously have traditional fishing as part of their culture. So fishing has, always been part of their culture. Then just a little bit about the development of formal subsistence fisheries in the province. Prior to the introduction of forestry in the 1930s and the proclamation of protected areas and provincial legislation in the 1980s, traditional fishing practices were still employed. So there were no restrictions, and traditional methods still sort of were employed. So without restrictions. And then in the 1980s, legislation was implemented, provincial legislation, which involved licenses and bag and size limits. Those were enforced, and that resulted in conflict with the then Natal Parks Board. There is a difference in the way that in the Maputoland area agreement was reached with the traditional leadership and the nature conservation, the KwaZulu-Natal Department of Nature Conservation, and traditional fishing practices continued without restrictions, and that is the situation that we have today. And then in 1992 and 1995, the first projects were introduced by the KDNC, where monitoring the use of subsistence and artisanal fisheries started, and that actually involved fishers for the first time in the management of those fisheries. And then in 1995, that was the first co-management project, which was introduced by the Natal Parks Board, and they investigated co-management. And then also a sustainable harvest model was developed for subsistence fisheries. In 1998, the Marine Living Resources Act was promulgated, And that, for the first time, was legislation that recognized subsistence fishes or subsistence fisheries as a sector, which is distinct from other sectors, of which at the time it was only the commercial and the recreational sector. And then in 2000, the co-management model, which was tested at Sekulu, was actually rolled out to the rest of the province. Resource use in KZN. At the moment, we have 23 communities. Those communities have been identified as bona fide subsistence fisheries communities, and that was done through a process in 1994 in which the Subsistence Fisheries Task Group actually did some in-depth research on subsistence and artisanal fishes along the whole coastline of South Africa. And they during that study, identified bona fide communities involved in subsistence and artisanal fisheries. The current management situation, and I'll go into this a little bit more in the next slide, is that we've got 10 formal and 12 informal communities, but the informal communities are monitored. We have approximately 2,500 people who participate in 7 fishing types, and these are in order of importance. That is the fish trap fishery, which is our only, well, apart from the estuarine sand prawn fishery, which is a very small artisanal fishery, it's our only artisanal or small-scale fishery in the province. We have the marine and estuarine rod and line, marine rocky and sandy shore invertebrates, and estuarine sand and mud prawns, and then traditional spear fishing, which is only obviously in the Cozy Bay Lake system. Then in 2012, in terms of applications for formal permits or exemptions, we received 1,359 exemption applications, and those obviously come through our co-management structures. And of those applications, 421 were for intertidal invertebrates, which the focus is brown mussel and that fishery, and I'll go into that a little bit more in another slide, and 938 for shore-based rod and line fishing. Yeah, not a very nice map to actually, but unfortunately, it's the coastline is long. It was just to show the extent of the fisheries. So these are all the formal fishing zones that we have in the province. So from the northern areas, Sodwana Bay, Sekulu, have I got it right here? Mbonambi, then Port Dunford and Mpembeni, Nanoti, Mgababa and Fazazan, and then Port Edward in the south. And these are the informal fishing areas, which are all focused around the Maputiland area. The importance of fisheries. So subsistence and artisanal fisheries in the province have an important nutritional and cultural role to play. Nutritional, as I said earlier, it's important protein supplement for poor rural communities who in most instances don't have employment and don't have many options. And the cultural importance is many of our fisheries, the fishing practice is actually embedded in the tradition of the community. Kilograms of food produced, that's obviously important to measure importance. So in our informal fisheries, it's clear that the fish trap fishery, being the only artisanal fishery, takes the lion's share in that area, and it's a significant catch for 2010 compared to the other fisheries, which are quite small in comparison. In our formal fisheries, the marine rod and line, it's only 6,000 kgs in 2009, and the invertebrate fishery, which is quite significant, is 12,000 kilograms in 2009. In the fish trap fishery, the main species targeted are mullet and Natal stumpnose. In the marine and estuarine rod and line fishery, it's shad and large spot pompano, including spotted grunter, and then Natal stumpnose. In our intertidal fisheries, so south of St. Lucia, the focus is brown mussels and red bait as well in some areas. And then in the intertidal fisheries north of St. Lucia, it's a mixed harvest. So they're harvesting mussels and most other invertebrates that they find on the rocky shore. Then just a little bit about our management. So Izimvelo KZN Wildlife has a subsistence fisheries unit, and that unit has been functional since about 2000 and is funded at the moment by the Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries. That is the small-scale fisheries unit. We have 10 communities that are formally co-managed. We have a co-management approach that we have adopted with those communities. And the role of the Subsistence Fisheries Unit is really to bring together the community and the authority, so Isimvelo, KZN Wildlife, to form that co-management of fisheries. And we have a team of managers and extension officers and other people that support the unit. We have obviously those functional co-management structures which were established in around 1995 and to 2000. And at the moment we have 16 of those structures which are functioning. They meet on a monthly basis. The formal fisheries, as I said previously, are dominated by brown mussel, which is controlled through a quota system. And then shore-based rod and line fisheries, where controls are aligned to the national recreational fishery regulations. I said with exceptions because they are able to harvest bait. And they also are confined to zones, to fishing zones, which are obviously on their permits. So they are confined to a subsistence harvesting zone, which, as I said earlier, is normally adjacent to their community. We have formal fishery operational management plans, so subsistence operational management plans for all fisheries, and they are implemented where our formal fisheries are established, but where our informal fisheries we are still working towards formalising those. Obviously, the OMPs are not yet implemented. We have a comprehensive community monitoring program where we have 76 catch data monitors and 30 awareness monitors. That program is currently funded by the Expanded Public Works program. The program, we basically deploy monitors all along the coast. At each subsistence zone, we have between 4 and 6 monitors per zone, and they capture catch and effort and stock data. The catch and effort data from fishers, and then we have an annual stock survey for all of our mussel fisheries. That data is obviously all then collected and put into a central database, and reports are produced, and to inform management decisions. A little bit, our 12 informal communities north of Mabibi. So again, those are monitored, although they are informal. The informal fisheries are dominated by the fish trap fishery, and then just a little bit about our program. We do reseeding projects where we see there's a need, and we have quite an extensive training program in which all participants of the subsistence fisheries program are trained, including the communities, the children from our fishing communities. We have annual workshops where we discuss things like sustainability and wise use of resources, that sort of thing. So management challenges in subsistence and artisanal fisheries in the province. There's been a development of the new small-scale fisheries policy, which came about mainly due to the inadequate legislative framework that the previous legislation didn't recognise small-scale fishers. The principles of the new policy, which is now finalised as of June 2012, it was gazetted. There's some principles in there which may present some management challenges for the Isimvelo subsistence fisheries units, and one of them is a multi-species approach, which is a predetermined variety or mix of marine living resources resources. That will probably not be a problem for our formal fisheries, where their focus is 2 single species, but it may present some difficulties for the northern areas where they are at present harvesting a variety of resources or of species. And even more challenging is that they are doing that in a protected area, a marine protected area. The historical participation, previously our criteria for entering the fishery was 50 years. And that's now been reduced to 10 years. So that is definitely going to present some difficulties in terms of people accessing the fishery, which we're going to have to deal with. Preferential access, that one may present a challenge, not really in the intertidal fisheries, but possibly in the line fisheries and again in MPAs. The policy is development focused, and that presents a challenge for KZN fisheries, because there is the potential for development of our fisheries is very limited. So during the policy development process, there has been a lot of discussion with our fishers, and a lot of meetings with other provinces, And there is expectation that has been raised with our fishers in the province regarding the development of their fisheries, because in other areas it's viable to develop fisheries, particularly in the Western Cape. So yeah, this is a problem that we're dealing with at the moment, where there is an expectation to progress from subsistence to small scale. So yeah, that's a challenge that we're experiencing at the moment. And then again, a delay with the implementation of the policy. We're finding that it's taking an incredibly long time. The Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries is currently busy with a provincial implementation plan, and I believe that will be rolled out early next year. But in the process, fishers are frustrated, and at the same time, we've had mobilization of fisheries activists from the Western Cape who are giving fishers the information they need to hear, which is information regarding the policy. And we're finding that they are forming committees parallel to our structures and are giving fishers information about the development of fisheries. And we're finding that, again, expectations are being raised. And we feel that the implementation plan does need to be rolled out first before those kind of expectations are raised in communities. So, yeah, that is definitely a management challenge. A big management challenge at the moment is the informal fisheries, which are unregulated in the Maputoland area. And research suggests that harvesting pressure is contributing to depleted resources. One of the biggest problems is the unwillingness of communities to participate, and then obviously the commercialization and modernization of the fish trap fishery. We are working very hard, and we have allocated huge resources to this project of what we call Maputoland formalization. But we really are struggling with it, and the unwillingness of the communities to participate is actually our biggest problem. Like I say, we have allocated a lot of resources to this particular project, and we've done exchange programs where we've taken communities from Maputoland to an area like Sekulu, where the resource is being sustainably managed, and there's beautiful big mussels, and they're taking off kind of 800 kgs at one harvesting session. And we've tried to sort of demonstrate visually to communities the result of formal management, but it doesn't seem to be very effective. So yeah, we are going to have to really put our heads together and try and think of some better solutions to this problem, because we have had small pockets of success. The Nkobukeni community have agreed to come on board, but generally we're not succeeding. In our formal fishing areas, we've just got fishers are not really happy. In the days when we came along and we formalized fisheries and we gave people access, that was seen as a great benefit at that time, but that sort of is forgotten, and fishers are just dissatisfied now with controls, especially regarding sale. Threats to our program or to subsistence and artisanal fisheries are the dependence of fishers on resources and the absence of alternatives, particularly in the northern KZN areas. In the more southern KZN areas, we find that people do enter into informal and temporary employment, but in the northern areas there is high dependence. Then there's decentralization plans of national government. The Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries have got they've got plans rather, thinking of my time, to set up provincial offices, and they are there's not an acknowledgement of the work that Esenvelo has done over the past sort of 15 years in subsistence on artisanal fisheries. They're wanting to set up a structure similar to that of the other provinces, so it's sort of a template that's being applied. And it's a difficult one because our situation in the province is unique. So this template approach is quite worrying. And they have deployed provincial staff already, fisheries development workers who have a similar role to our existing extension officers. So yeah, we have these challenges that we are tackling, but they're not easy ones. Our unit is not secure. It's considered a project. We have annual funding arrangements, and all of the staff are on fixed-term contracts. Then again, the destabilization of structures by activists, misinformation regarding the development potential of fisheries. We have had these structures in place for the past sort of 12, 15 years, and we're finding that fishers are not wanting to accept permits and so on. So that is an issue as well. And then again, the Maputoland fisheries, that is obviously a threat which we're dealing with. Then alternatives, just a little bit on this. We, as a program, are dealing with alternatives. It's a relatively new part of our program that we're dealing with. It's definitely not our kind of forte, but we are trying to play a facilitation role. And we've just recently formed the Alternatives for KZN Fishers Forum, and it's all about reducing effort and dependence. And providing real livelihood options for KZN fishers, because fishing does not provide a real livelihood for KZN fishers. They can eat their catch, but they can't sell it, so they can't get money. So it's not a real livelihood option, fishing. And we're facilitating livelihoods assessments, and in the next week or so, we're going to be starting a livelihoods assessment using the Sustainable Livelihoods Framework with the Sekulu community. And then, just regarding aquaculture, we were just a bit concerned to hear that it's being promoted as community projects to address unemployment and poverty, but we feel that there should be investigation into projects already implemented in other countries and the results of those projects. Thank you.
Thank you.